Uganda is generally classified as a developing country based on economic, human, and social development indicators. Uganda also faces several challenges that have affected stability and sustainability of its economic development, and some of the notable challenges include corruption, political instability, income inequality, and limited access to essential services in some areas. Like many other countries in Africa, Uganda still grapples with the challenge of illicit financial flows and money laundering due to its cash-based informal economy, which has left the country in the spotlight. Uganda was placed in a grey list in 2020. It means the country was identified, but it made commitments with a Financial Action Task Force to address the specific issues within a given time frame. But ever since, no success has been registered due to several reasons which require serious attention. In Uganda, money laundering directly affects the layman because of little knowledge they have about it. We randomly moved around the streets with an aim of finding out whether the general public is aware of money laundering, and this is all they shared.
Abepene emisolo abo nebasinga otukosa kuba bebatwala ssente bebazibba ani abatwa musolo kubanga ssente ez'omusolo zemuntu wa wansi zempa omusolo abatwa musolo ebabba ssente abo abakozi ba gavumenti babba ssente babasonyiwa emisolo tosasula misolo ate babba tusasula zebabba
ababba omusolo gw'abantu ogulina okubakolera ebintu byabwe ebigenda mu maaso ng'okuteeka eddagala mu malwaliro, ng'ensimbi ezirina okusasula abasomesa ba gavumenti, ng'ensimbi ezirina okukola enguudo. Nze mbeera awo n'osanga ekinnya mu kkubo nga piki esobola oggwamu amazima ga Katonda, musaabaze n'avaako n'agwa eri oba ne piki n'ekutuka olupanka. N'ensooka ne neebuuza oba Pulezidenti Yoweri Kaguta Museveni oba abantu abo oba abeera tabamanyi.
Zino za feke ogamba feke mati era njirabirawo era bwe njiraba olukuja zisaliimu nobwezebeera mu kizibu kubanga koto wokwata oluseeti kolage ekyokulabirako.
According to a renowned commercial lawyer, he however defined money laundering as the process of disguising proceeds of crime and integrating it into the legitimate financial system. In Uganda, there are different red flags of money laundering, as our lawyer elaborates.
So money laundering, the Uganda version will be, of course, you wash money clean, which is rather dirty, direct it to a legitimate financial system, and if it goes through the process successfully, then that becomes laundered resources or finances, and that's, in simplest terms, what money laundering would mean. Where you see a country, I'll give Uganda as an example, where there is mushrooming, sports betting and gambling. Those are signs that it's an economy that is founded on money laundering. Money laundering will also happen where there is grave and entrenched corruption in a country, and that's typical of Uganda. So basically, in Uganda, there is a saying, you can get rich overnight.
He went ahead and defined that tax evasion completely incorporates money laundering because of a criminal aspect involved.
A tax evader is a criminal. A person who cannot give detailed account of where their source of income is coming from and where the accountability on how it is spent, those are criminals. Now, it has diverse effects on the economy.
The Landlord and Tenant Act 2022 regulates the relationship between the landlords and tenants, modifies and consolidates the law relating to the rent of premises, and specifies landlords and tenants' responsibilities for letting out of premises. It stipulates that where the rent is 500,000 Ugandan shillings or more, the agreement should be in writing or in the form of a data message for it to be enforced. Upon the tenancy agreement being signed by both parties, the landlord should give a copy of it to the tenant. However, when we talked to different businessmen in the Central Business Center of Kampala, this was totally different.
If you go beyond 500 on rent, you should have an agreement, tenancy agreement, between your landlord and a tenant.
The Act further stipulates the responsibilities of both the landlord and the tenant, among which are, upon payment of the rent as agreed upon under the agreement, the landlord has a duty to issue a receipt to the tenant. A receipt shall be issued immediately where payment is made in person or within 5 working days of receiving the payment where payment was not made in person, and shall include, among others, the amount of money and period for which the rent is paid. The landlord shall keep a record of all receipts of payments of rent. But according to the receipts, we looked at, most of them don't contain the amount, instead contain the period.
And in law it states that whoever pays above 500,000 shillings for rent, he or she must receive a receipt, a written one, a written receipt indicating the amount which you have paid for your rent. But here most of the landlords do not want to write or to reflect that amount on the receipt.
They elaborated to us the diverse effects that come along with the landlord's actions, some of which have forced several traders out of business due to the fact they fail to present all clear evidence of their incomes and expenditures.
Wherever URA comes, they always say that you need to file out your income. We need to know your status, business status, how is it? But when we try to tell them that for us we receive receipt, empty receipts. So even now this year I've made losses. I have not got any profit. So just let me go without paying income tax. They just tell you, no, please. If you can't file out and you can't present the real facts of what you have used, we cannot give you any pardon. So you should show us your income status, your input and output. If you can't present it, we are sorry, you need to pay for income tax. But many traders always make losses, but they don't have that chance of presenting themselves to URA that they have made loss due to the landlords who fails to give out those written receipts.
Based on the Ugandan law, it requires the landlords of properties, either commercial or residential, to remit income tax on the rental income they receive. And since they don't indicate the fees, how do they file their returns? And what could be the motive behind this practice? But unfortunately, they shied away from our cameras.
Mbadde nsaba kubuuzaako. Hello. Mbadde nsabayoko ku budde bw'okusinkana otwogerekoko ku nsonga y'okuba nti nno URA egenda kutandika obbala ebizimbe n'okuba nno mugenda tandika kukozesa e-free system ku bapangisa bamu. Ono Monica Nabyonga.
Ogamba kirwawo mbuuza nga
ndi wa mawulire ssebo.
Ndwako naawe. Tugana na mawulire.
Kale ssebo.
However, this act did not stop us. We went ahead to meet URA and still showed them our evidence-based receipts, and we inquired whether they knew about their practice.
It's not that we don't know, but we are trying to get an amicable solution for both sides. Yes, we have discovered some of these challenges, more so in the informal sector, the trade area, where tenants are renting from a building owner. But before even filing the return, it is clearly in my tax law, it tells you need to keep proper business records. Secondly, still in my tax law, that's the tax procedures code, it was very clear on the 1st of July, I think it was 2020, we rolled out the IFRIS platform. And on top of that, the Minister of Finance gazetted VAT registered clients to be using the IFRIS platform, implying that they should issue e-invoices.
Ms. Hafsa also explained the grief of how this practice affects them as a tax body, mostly when it comes to collecting tax. But she says they are working out all possible ways to combat it and create sanity between both parties and the government as well.
So it's quite unfair if this landlord can't issue the right document, because it disorganizes the whole chain. Because one, if you're giving me just paid, something like that, paid doesn't have who is issuing, exactly who is issuing, what's the name of the person issuing. Those nitty-gritties I need to know. Ideally, it would be an off on our side. And secondly, on the side of the tenant, how will they account for this expense? Because ideally, I do allow them expenses. But these expenses should be justifiable expenses. How do you justify them? We expect expenses to be IFRIS related. So when the landlord does not do this, they are basically tampering with the whole system, because the landlord's income is an expense to the tenant. So which expenses am I going to allow for this tenant? Because we all know rent takes a big chunk of money in somebody's business expenses. So at the end of the day, it's disadvantaging the tenant, and at the same time, it is also disadvantaging the government. So we are still trying to continuing the engagement to see that we deliver the right method. We want to know why exactly, why can't they issue the right document? Is there pain? Is it a knowledge gap? Do they need training? Is it system compatibility? We need to see what exactly could be the pain, so that us as URL, we are meant to see that our processes are simpler.
However, an experienced economic researcher from Accord Uganda has warned how this cancer of tax evasion is likely to affect the development of the country if it is not dealt with early enough. He went ahead and advised the Uganda'S tax body on how to go about it.
Delivery, whether it is health, whether it is education, is financed by resources that are generated by government. And one of the sources is through taxation. So indeed, if Uganda is not able to generate enough resources to finance development as a result of tax evasion, to provide the necessary services. Two, actually we have to resort to borrowing, and you know the borrowing also has its own high costs and implications. And therefore, it is not a job that can only be done by Uganda Revenue Authority. It needs coordination between Uganda Revenue Authority and other agencies, because URA does not have the monopoly of investigations. I know they have a tax investigations department, but we also have other agencies that actually do investigations. And therefore, the collaboration or the coordination between URA and these other agencies that do or support their work.
Money laundering is a cancer that is slowly and steadily hindering Uganda's development. But the question is, does Uganda have the potential to heal from it? Monica Nabyonga, Smart 24 TV, driving business.